Well, thank you guys for coming out. It's nice to see a lot of people who aren't my current students, who aren't just here to win brownie points for the semester, so it's good to see. As Devin said, those who know me know that... Is it getting hot in here to you guys? A little hot? I don't know. Maybe this will be That's better. So those who know me, you do know that I am a little, maybe slightly obsessed with superheroes. As Devin said, those who have my classes, either end the semester being completely sick of Superman, Spider-Man, and so forth, or they become fans and ask me for comic book recommendations, or they just say they've become fans and hopes I'll give them a better grade. If that's the case, just don't tell me. But I'm definitely into superheroes, and I'm not the only person into superheroes, obviously. They're everywhere in today's society. They're on t-shirts. They're on movies, television. They really are even on toilet paper. This is an actual real product you can purchase. It's not just a gag. So they really are everywhere. Those who know me, though, also know that I'm not particularly pleased with the way that some of my superheroes have been portrayed as of late in certain comic books and films. And I'm not alone in that either. Comic book fans are a passionate and vociferous lot. We're very strongly minded. But I describe myself as a fan of what I call iconic superheroes. And what I mean by this is the superheroes that exist in the greater public consciousness. In other words, if you went up to a person on the street who'd maybe never read a comic book in his life, you've never seen a comic book superhero movie, and you ask him, about this or that character, he's going to recognize certain things. He's going to know who the villain is in certain stories. He's going to know who the hero is. He's going to know basic things about strengths and weaknesses. He'll know what a Batcave is. He'll know what kryptonite is. And most importantly, he'll know certain things the hero would do, the hero wouldn't do. He'll know certain traits, things that the heroes stand for. Those are really hard to do away with once they become fixed in the public consciousness. Everyone in this room, we all know that Superman stands for truth, justice, and American way, right? We know that Spider-Man teaches us that with great power comes great responsibility, right? So they're really ingrained in our culture, and they show up in the most mundane way, a lot of the references. I was in a restaurant the other day, and they had a cardboard cutout on the table advertising their new dessert, and the tagline underneath it said, "Every diet has a kryptonite." So, of course, I bought it. Had to reward that kind of marketing. But superheroes are our modern-day mythology. That level of permeation really is indicative of a mythology. And that's the one tagline, the one thing that you'll hear scholars say, whether it's a history channel on superheroes or professors in a class, they'll talk about how they are a modern-day mythology. But they don't always say what that means or exactly why it's important. So that's what I'm going to do today, is talk about this principle in 2 points. First of all, mythology does play a role in our culture. It's not just entertainment. It actually serves a purpose for us. And then secondly, we're going to talk about the responsibility we have to our mythology. If it's not just entertainment, what does that mean for us? What should we be doing in response to it? So let's start with the first point. What is the role of mythology? Well, for one, mythology helps a culture define its values. John Fiske is the cultural studies guru. He writes that mythology is a society's way of understanding, expressing, and communicating to itself concepts that are important to its self-identity as a culture. And as far back as we have recorded history, we know that cultures have been using stories, using mythologies to relay values, lessons, knowledge that they should be passed down. Here we have the caves of Lascaux. These are cave paintings found in, this is a hunting scene, and it's perhaps giving us some sort of religious significance, but it's also there to teach. This is how hunting was done. We see them in a group. We see certain tactics that are used throughout the cave. It's done in bright colors to capture the imagination. A lot of action scenes catch the eye. It's going to stick with us. And stories are easy to relay information. Stories are remembered a little bit easier. Before the invention of the written word, we could tell stories, we could remember them, we could pass them down from generation to generation. They could be drawn easily. But then even after the invention of the written word, stories are still utilized because stories can reach across all the language barriers, especially visual stories, and they have a special place in our minds. So these are the metopes on the Parthenon. This is a rendering of the Parthenon in Athens. And the metopes are the little panels right here, right between the columns and the roof. And the metopes would, on the Parthenon specifically, each side tells a different story. This side here is telling the Centauromachi. Let's see if I got a picture of that. Yeah. The Centauromachi means the War of the Centaurs. And in this specific story, we had a wedding party, and the centaurs are invited. But the centaurs aren't used to the wine that's being served at the wedding party, so they get a little crazy, and then their animal instincts start to come out. They start wanting to murder the men, abduct the women, all kinds of chaos, and the people at the wedding party have to fight them. They have to basically slay them. And the message or the theme that story is trying to hear is the idea that we should always subjugate our more primal urges to our higher sense of reason, especially in a society. And every side of the temple teaches a different story, but they're all the same message, whether it's the Amazonamaki or so forth. They all teach that same principle, which is fitting for the Parthenon because it's the temple of Athena. And Athena is the goddess of wisdom, goddess of intelligent activity, and so forth. These metopes, they do run in a succession. So you would be able to see them and read the story. Even though there's no text, you would read the story one panel to the next, and you would get the idea of the scope, what's going on. And we think of the Parthenon today, we might think of the faded concrete, coloring that it would have. Of course, it's dilapidated, falling apart. But when it was actually created, when it was actually built, they would have painted many scenes in it, specifically these metopes in these bright, vivid colors. That's so you could see them from the ground. Remember, that's just crazy high up, so you'd be able to make out which character's which, what's going on action-wise. Now, at this point, you might have already kind of put this together in your mind, but these metopes are basically a comic strip. They're comic strips telling us the adventures of the superpowered beings from Greek mythology. And in this context, there's really no difference between that and our own comic strips in America that are telling our stories, of action-packed stories of our superpowered figures. And comic book superheroes, they do relay values and lessons as well. This is another comic book. This is a Wonder Woman teaching this young boy. He's having a problem where he doesn't have a lot of energy to really go out and participate in the sports and stuff with his friends on a day-to-day basis. So she's teaching him how to live a healthy lifestyle. She's going to teach him how to get up in the morning, eat a healthy breakfast, make sure he gets enough sleep, make sure he's got the fresh air, gets activity on a daily basis, and then he thanks her that he's able to go out and function in a normal way. So basic lessons you'd want to teach a child. This is a Superman story, and this was for Brotherhood Week, they called it. And here we have a young boy, he's a new kid on the block, and he goes to hang out with these people, and they say, what's your name? He says, my name is Sam Levy. And then this Billy kid says, well, I don't want to hang out. Basically, he knows that he's Jewish. He says, I don't want to hang out with a Jewish child on the street. Well, Billy's older brother and Superman show up immediately, and they take all the children off to the battlegrounds of battle cemeteries, Iwo Jima. His older brother had fought in the war, and Superman explains that this is a place where people from all different ethnicities and religious backgrounds came and fought together for common causes. His brother reveals that he was actually saved, that one of his best friends was Jewish in the war and actually saved his life. So Superman ends it up for us. He said it never should matter what a person is, Protestant, Jew, Catholic, etc., nor should it matter what the color of a person's skin is, where the parents were born. That's what Brotherhood Week is all about. It's practiced at 52 days a year. So we've got this idea that this is what the values, this is what our superheroes are teaching us in many of the same ways where the Parthenon will be giving its their values as well. Now, there is an obvious difference, though, between our comic strips and images like on the Parthenon, and that's the fact that these aren't religious characters for us. These are fictional characters. Ancient adults saw Hercules, Thor, and others as heavenly beings teaching spiritual lessons, and the examples I just gave were fictional comic strips targeting children. But nonetheless, fictional stories, they're more for just children. They're a catalyst of meaning. Fictional stories benefit more than just children. Robert McGee, the great storyteller, says that stories are the creative conversion of life itself into a more powerful, clear, more meaningful experience. They are the currency of human contact. So, as we said, there's something more powerful about telling a story to relay a meaning rather than just giving someone a lecture. Whether that meaning is about a healthy lifestyle, respect of ethnicities, or subjugating your primal urges to reason, stories will stick with us longer than those kinds of sermons and lectures. Jerome Bruner, he puts it this way. He says, myth is at once an external reality and the resonance of the internal vicissitudes of man. All right, vicissitudes is a great college word, right? It basically means the struggles, the challenges we'll face in our everyday life. So mythology, he's saying, is the external and in reality to the characters that are in these stories. But otherwise, if Spider-Man's fighting a villain, we're going to see him actually fight a literal villain and actually try to get out of a literal trap. So it's external reality to the character. But it resonates in our internal vicissitudes, right? Our internal struggles. Some superheroes do deal with things internal, like insecurity and doubt, and we'll get to those in a second. But in general, the audience of mythology, we watch those external struggles in our heroes, and something resonates on the inside of us. The external battles of our heroes become a metaphor for our internal struggles. I've said a lot, and I've said internal and external a lot there, so let me give you a concrete example. When we watch Batman fighting the Joker, okay, this is a slide from Batman Arkham Origins, one of the video games that were popular. Joker says, it's amazing what can be done when you don't concern yourself with right and wrong, when you just do the things for a laugh. Now, we know Batman believes in justice. He has a strong moral code. He's not going to kill. And at every turn that he fights the Joker's constantly trying to tear that down, constantly trying to concoct some scenario that would make Batman kill, constantly trying to do something bad enough that would make Batman kill him. He's constantly trying to tear him down. and laugh at his beliefs, basically. So when we read or watch that in a story, on some level, maybe not even consciously, we're going to think about the things we believe in and in the ways people have tried to make us feel silly or tear down our convictions. We can think about our own internal doubts as well, the things we might not like to talk about, the doubts we have about our principles. So the Joker can be a personification for the adversity and the self-consciousness we sometimes feel about our own principles. Those principles can be anything, religious principles, gender principles. These days, if you stand up and take a stand for anything, somebody somewhere is going to roll their eyes at you. So we have that story to play out that anxiety for us. And this is how mythology does play out those conflicts. It's not unlike the role play that therapists will make people do. It's about putting your own problems in a different context to get a fresh new perspective on them. Now, not all superhero mythologies do operate in the same way. Just like fairy tales or like Greek or like mythological characters, different heroes and different stories do operate in different ways, and they have different roles. So one of the oldest types of stories that characters will play for us is the warning type. And this type of character exhibits behavior that leads to a negative consequence and is designed to serve as a warning not to repeat his mistakes. A great example of this kind of character from ancient mythology is Icarus. You know the story of Icarus. His father Daedalus invented designed the labyrinth for King Minos. He falls out of favor with the king, so the king throws Daedalus and his son Icarus inside the labyrinth, locks them up. Daedalus then, he's a great inventor, so he fashions a set of wings for himself and then one for his son Icarus so they can fly out of the labyrinth and escape. And Icarus thinks this is great, he's flying, so he's getting carried away, he's going higher and higher, and Daedalus is trying to warn him, but Icarus won't listen. And eventually he flies so high that the heat from the sun melts the wax, binding the feathers together on his wings. His wings fall apart, he plummets to his death. The message is don't grasp too high, don't ask those existential questions that are beyond our comprehension, or else you'll drive yourself crazy out there in the ether. You fly too high, your wings are going to melt, you'll end up a moral nihilist or start doing harm to yourself and others. That's the general message of the story. So in superhero stories, these warning type characters translate as our villains. The only difference between a villain and a hero in a superhero story is how they react to some great tragedy in their life, how they react to a trauma. Batman's parents are killed in front of him. Most people know the origin story of Batman. Poor guy, he's watched his parents murdered in front of him, but he doesn't go crazy. He doesn't go off the deep end. He doesn't try to fill the void. Instead, he decides, I'm going to make a promise that I'm going to dedicate my life to justice. I'm going to, war on criminals, basically, so that no other little child is going to have to face what I've just been through. That's how he deals with it. He finds meaning in the tragedy. Juxtapose that with one of his villains, Two-Face. Two-Face completely loses it when a villain throws acid in his face. Scars him. He decides that there is no meaning to the universe. There's only chance. So it's perfectly logical that he should go out and kill random people based on the flip of a coin. Kind of an extreme polar opposite there, but that's the example. So the story's telling you, be like Batman, don't be like Two-Face. Superman. Growing up, Superman is he's a little different than most people. He can see through them. He can't play football because he might hurt somebody. He can't really go out on too many dates because if he kisses a girl, his heat vision kicks in. It's all kind of craziness. So instead of feeling ostracized and sorry for himself and maybe feeling, hey, I'm more powerful than everybody, why don't I go ahead and rule them? Instead of doing that, he dedicates his life to serving people. He says, I have this power, I've been given these gifts for a reason, I'm going to use them to help everybody else. So again, we're responding to some sort of trauma or stress in a positive way, as opposed to the warning type, which is Lex Luthor, his big villain, right? Lex Luthor is born, and Lex Luthor is at least 10 times as smart as the greatest minds of history. Certainly smarter than everybody around him, certainly smarter than the people in Smallville, and he decides these people are ants. I'm obviously better than them. I need to rule them. I need to grow up and make them serve me through my businesses, through my political connections, and so forth. So these types of stories are warnings, translating, telling us to do the thing, follow the hero, not the villain. Now, another division of superheroes we find is between the ones who inspire us simply by being themselves and the ones who inspire us by overcoming their failures. And this is the difference between what I call the aspirational superheroes and the cathartic motivational superheroes. These are really big terms, so I'll explain what I mean. Let's start with the aspirational superheroes. Superman has traditionally been a character that audiences aspire to. Like Captain America or Wonder Woman, he embodies a purity, a level of good intrinsic to his character. There's no reason that he had to obtain it, that's just who he is. No human being in real life can obtain a traditional Superman level of goodness. That's way beyond what we can do with our human failings. But these heroes inspire us to try for that anyway. A lot of people would criticize them and say, well, they're just unrelatable. They're too good, they're unrelatable. But we find that that's not really how audiences receive them. The audience is inspired to try for their level no matter how realistic. And as a result, they come up that much higher. This is a role of a lot of religious figures we find in different religions throughout history and even today. Hercules, he had physical strength and the perseverance of a god. No man could hope to imitate his feats, but when the ancient Greeks heard tales of Hercules slaying the Nemean lion or capturing the Cretan bull, they could think, well, okay, then I can at least go out there and say, finish plowing my field, or deal with some sort of stress that they have in their lives, and then give glory to the gods for it. For a modern day example, think about Christianity, for example. Christians will look at the biblical text of Jesus' life and believe this to be a man without sin, but they don't feel unrelatable. Instead, they study that life, and there's no way they can achieve a life without sin, but they're going to try and study different scenarios to try to come up higher in that situation. So it's that same principle. In our American culture, though, we don't have one unifying religious mythology. So our secular mythology translates this by giving us characters who express the pinnacle of American ideals instead of spiritual perfection. Now, Superman does this. We've already seen that he fights for truth, justice, and the American way. We've seen that he's all for equality and principles, ethnicities, religions, all for everybody being treated the same. But he doesn't just fight for those principles, he really does embody them in terms of the American way. He's an immigrant to our country, right, from space. All of us, we tried hard enough to trace our lineage back to immigrants in this country. We've already seen him treat different backgrounds equally. He's humble. He doesn't misuse his powers for personal gain. If you think about it, Clark Kent could be the richest man in the world. How easy would it be for him to steal from a bank or whatever? But instead, he doesn't do that. He holds down a daily job at the Daily Planet and then saves the day on a daily basis on top of that. So not misusing power that you have is a pretty crucial idea to us in a country that bases large portions of its government on democracy. Whether you're a politician in office or just the voter in the voting booth, misuse of your power, that's the seed of destruction for a democracy that kind of requires everybody working together, or at least following certain rules. So Superman, at least the iconic Superman, he always does the right thing, always saves the day. There's no room for moral ambiguity in a Superman story. It's about empowerment, hope, inspiration. In a mythological context, this makes him no more unrelatable than Christians might find Jesus. It just sets him up as our standard. Now, psychologist Robin Rosenberg, she also makes a division that comes into play here in terms of superhero origin stories. She says there are different types of origin stories. One, we have the destiny type story. Superheroes are just destined to be this character. And then there are the characters who are responding to some sort of great trauma in their life. And interesting to our discussion here, the aspirational characters, these ones that are just so good, they're the ones that fall into the destiny camp of origin. You think about Superman. He was sent to Earth by his father to lead us to become better. A portion of his role as a hero was pre-established. The same can be said of the other aspirational heroes I mentioned. We've got Captain America. Dr. Erskine chose him to be the candidate for the super soldier experiment because he saw something good already within him. Wonder Woman, of course, is created, formed out of clay by her mother, and the Greek gods imbue her with certain values and powers right at the time of her birth. So that hero, by way of destiny, they're already there. So what about the cathartic motivational characters, the second kind of character I was talking about? Well, they're the ones that would follow more of this reaction to the tragic origin. So we've got two parts of this type of character, cathartic and motivational. Now, catharsis is, those who study Greek mythology or the classics, drama, they'll know that catharsis is a tricky term to pin down and really define. It changes a little bit from Greek tragedy to Renaissance tragedy. We're certainly going to stretch it a little bit, applying it to superheroes. But catharsis in general is the idea that it's a purging of emotions, purging of excess emotions, specifically ones that might get in the way of your daily day-to-day function. Stuff like despair, self-doubt, loneliness, those kind of emotions that you would kind of get out of your system while watching a play. And the great example of this in fiction is Hamlet. He's the great literary catharsis character here. We've got the story of Hamlet long before Shakespeare ever wrote it down. It was already existing at some point. And of course, now we have years after it. People watch the plays. People love the character. They relate to him quite a bit. So let's see why. Consider the story of Prince Hamlet. Okay, in Act 1, the ghost of his dead father comes to him and tells him the kingdom's in peril. I was murdered by your uncle, who of course then went on and married your mother, take over the kingdom, so now the kingdom's going to suffer all these repercussions because of that murder. So you, Hamlet, you have to go and make this right. You have to go avenge me, go take care of your uncle, deal with this thing. And then Hamlet spends 98% of the play thinking, is that really true? Do I really need to do that? And then he comes up with all these stall tactics, and he wonders if he's really got it in him to do it or not. He sets up all these little tests for his uncle. He leaves the kingdom at one point. And then by the time and all these people while he's stalling are just dying around him left and right. Everybody's just dying because he's stalling and does these things. And then in the end, when he finally steps up and does what he needs to do, the stage is literally just littered with corpses, especially even Hamlet's himself at the very end. And if he would have just acted on what his father told him to do at the beginning of the play, very few people would have to die. Certainly his uncle, but it wouldn't have been as many as that. So we see Hamlet there, and we relate to him so much because it's not that our uncles killed our fathers and married our mothers. It's not that we're causing people to die, but we know what it's like to have self-doubt. We know what it's like to have insecurity. We know what it's like to find it difficult to do that thing that our gut's telling us we need to do. And that can be anything. It can be apologizing to somebody we've wronged, or befriending someone we know is having a rough time. Anytime we act on that, we're taking a personal risk. So we know what it's like to hesitate and feel that. So as much as we relate to Hamlet, though, here's the thing. Ask any group of people which fictional character they'd like to be, not a single one of them is going to say Hamlet. No one wants to be indecisive. No one wants to be self-absorbed. No one wants to be ineffectual. Hamlet is the character who shows us how we are, not how we should be or not how we want to be. So if we're talking about a catharsis in terms of superheroes, that's obviously not going to cut it. They should be someone we would want to be, we would pretend to be, imagine to be. So we have to add this idea of motivation to this type of hero. And we'll see how this plays out. Perhaps the best example of the cathartic motivational character or hero is Spider-Man. Spider-Man is perhaps the best type. Peter Parker is just a teenager. When he's bitten by the radioactive spider, he gets his powers. And the first thing he does when he gets his powers is he decides, I'm going to go make some money. I'm going to be a professional wrestler. So he's out there, not exactly altruistic motives. Then at one point he watches a crime, a theft is happening. It varies on different tellings. But the thief runs towards him. He's easily able to stop the thief, but he decides, nope, not going to do it. And the police officer runs up when he catches up to him and says, why didn't you stop the thief? That would have been so easy for you. And he says, because it's not my job, it's your job. I'm sick of people telling me what to do. They've been pushing me around all my life. I've got these powers now. I don't have to listen to people anymore. Of course, that thief goes on then to murder his Uncle Ben. And then he deals with all of the devastation and blame, knowing that he was his fault, really, because if he could have stopped that thief then, he'd be in prison. He wouldn't have killed his Uncle Ben. So he goes through a lot of emotions that we can relate to. He made a mistake, and he really messed up. That's a tragic story. But instead of staying there in that despair and that self-pity, he stands up and decides, well, I'm going to do the right thing. He goes out and catches the thief. He doesn't kill him out of revenge. He turns him over to the police officers. He says, I'm going to continue to do this, and continue to use my powers responsibly. And that's the formula for Spider-Man stories over and over again. He's constantly failing. He shows off. He's overconfident. He wallows in self-pity. But then each time he gets back up, he shows us how to pick ourselves up and still win in the end, do the right thing in the end. Now, as a culture, we need both types of those heroes. We need our warning types and the supervillains. We need our aspirational type of heroes, and we need our cathartic motivational heroes. They do different jobs for us. We'll never actually reach the standard of characters like Superman or Captain America, but we always want to reach up and stretch for it. We come up to a certain level when we reach for that. And the important thing is that characters like Spider-Man and Green Arrow, characters who are the motivational cathartic, they're looking up to those aspirational heroes as well. So that does bring us into our responsibility that we have to our mythology. Remember our 2 points. We're talking about mythology does play a role in culture, it does serve a purpose, and then we have a responsibility. So what is our responsibility to these stories? Our job is discernment and consideration regarding what kinds of stories we tell, what kinds of stories we're going to respond to and listen to. A lot of storytellers and fans think that we really don't need those aspirational characters anymore. They're just too unrelatable, those traditional Superman, Captain America types. They think that those characters are too old school, too out of touch with reality. The edgier, the more human ones, they're the more realistic. So first of all, as I mentioned, we should harp on the fact that the cathartic motivational characters like Spider-Man, Green Arrow, they are themselves trying to be the aspirational heroes. So if you remove the aspirational hero, the edgier ones that you want to keep don't really work anymore. Spider-Man is a hero. He comes to be a hero kind of late in the Marvel universe, and he's fighting crime in the shadow of the Avengers. He's trying to be like his own heroes, people like Captain America. This is a scene from one of the Avengers animated series, and this is from the Civil War storyline. Of course, it's going to be in a Captain America film. In the DC universe, Green Arrow is the same way about Superman. Green Arrow, if you watch the show Arrow, you know he used to be just a total playboy, just a total reckless rich boy. And then he faces the trauma, gets shipwrecked on an island, goes through all this trauma, and then he decides that he's going to be more responsible, and he takes on the role of sort of being the people's hero. In the comic books, he's even more so the Robin Hood type character, really fights for the people. And he sees Superman as a little irrelevant. He thinks Superman is the big blue Boy Scout. He's not really in touch with people. But every time he's around Superman, he's just in awe. He feels that level of purity, that level of strength under control, and he can't help but to be inspired from him. This is a scene from the Identity Crisis storyline. They're trying to solve this murder that's happened, so Superman recognizes the knot. It's a Bowman's knot. It's actually a Boy Scout knot. Of course, Superman would have that, the big Boy Scout. And I love Green Lantern's thoughts here. I love him and hate him in the very same breath. You know, he just can't help but want to be him, no matter how much he sees himself as different than him. Cathartic motivational characters do try to be as the aspirational ones. You can't cut the aspirational ones, and then the whole system falls down. Secondly, though, concerning this idea that the cathartic motivational characters are better because they're more realistic, let's identify and get rid of the assumption that the more realistic equals intrinsically better. We're dealing with mythology, right? So the strength of these stories is in their ability to operate on a metaphorical level, symbolizing our internal struggles with their external conflicts. So realism has nothing to do with mythology. When someone wants more realism in a superhero story, most often what they really want isn't inspiration, but just the catharsis. They're seeking the Hamlet heroes who are going through the exact same mental and emotional stress as they are. Misery loves company, right? And there's got to be such a call for these kinds of stories that, in a lot of them, we're not even getting catharsis anymore. We're just getting one of those, hey, isn't life difficult kind of stories, and then moral ambiguity and the fade to black. So look like these movie posters to illustrate our point here. Just the change that's happened. And these, we'll start with posters that are happening long before the current realism fad in the superheroes, comics, and films. And these are first two from the original 1978 Superman film, the Richard Donner film starring Christopher Reeve. In this story, not only is Superman, he's chosen to be sent to Earth, he's destined to be here, but we as humans on Earth, we're destined too. Jor-El, his father, tells Superman that humans can be a great people, that we want to be. We just lack the light to show us the way. So that's why he sends Superman here, not to some other planet. So we're implied in this destiny. So here Superman is pointing up in both of these posters. He's flying upwards, he's pointing up to the future, our destiny, onwards and upwards. The slogan for this film was, "You'll believe a man can fly." And that's more than just the special effects of the film. That's really talking about if you apply yourselves, you humanity, you can be better, there's a brighter tomorrow, you'll just keep looking up, keep striving to be better, treat each other better, then you too can fly. Jumping forward, we've got, this is for the first Spider-Man film in 2002. This is Sam Raimi's film, the original one with Tobey Maguire. And it's a fitting shift here to the cathartic motivational character from the aspirational, because now we're looking down on him. He's no longer telling us where to look. We're no longer kind of looking up in awe of him. We're looking down on Spider-Man because we know the mistakes he makes. We know just how human he is. At the same time, though, despite those mistakes, he's climbing upwards. We know what he's done, we know, but he's still climbing upwards. There's the fun of that. We see this upward thrust. We're just at a different perspective of it, but we know he's going to show us how to overcome our mistakes, how to climb that wall on our own. Then we have a change that took place in the films starting around 2008 with The Dark Knight. Now, to be fair, Christopher Nolan's brooding, more conflicted superhero really took the world by storm. To be fair, though, if you are going to put any kind of superhero with this treatment and still let him be heroic, Batman is probably the only one that can really pull it off. But this idea of Batman, or the superhero, has a burden. Now he's looking down. He's looking inward. He's conflicted. He's not sure about himself. There's no joy in the hero work here. And if you've seen the movie, you know that that's very true in the story, too. He's fighting himself and his own doubts just as he is the Joker. Then we'll see that from this point on, it's just a slippery slope. Just about every superhero, almost every superhero poster you see has this sense. This is the Spider-Man reboot in 2012, The Amazing Spider-Man. Much darker colors here. This is dark drab. We see he's scarred. Hero work is hard. It leaves you scarred. It's difficult. He's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. He's looking down. He's looking inward. Then the exact year later, Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, the Superman reboot, is done. Again, looking down, weight of the world on the shoulders. Not a lot of joy in this. The colors are so dark, the picture's so dark, we can't even make out facial features. The camera filters sapping a lot of the color in the scene. And this is an interesting movie to mention in terms of plot as well, because it really mirrors the plot of Hamlet, if you think about it. We have his ghost dad, right? Jor-El's consciousness built into the computers there, telling him, guiding him, telling him, hey, this guy murdered me, this Zod guy, and the repercussions of that are going to affect your planet if you don't go and do this. You don't go to stuff. You need to go do this. But then the majority of the film, Kal-El is coming to terms with it. He's like, I don't really know. Is it the right thing? Do I need to do that or not? And when he does occasionally do a couple hero things and save some people, it's never definitively the right thing he should have done. There's always some question that, well, was that the right thing to do? I don't really have a good feeling about it. I'm not really sure. Then in the end, when he, of course, has waited so long and he does go to fight Zod, of course, people are just dying everywhere. Thousands of people are dying. So very much like Hamlet. The film has its fans, of course, but if you hear the fans, they'll defend it and they'll say things that you could imagine would be used to defend Hamlet himself. He's young at this point. Cut him a break. He's untrained. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's thrust into this situation, without any training, without knowing what he's doing. Give him a break. You could say those things for Hamlet. So what we've done here is we've taken the single most aspirational superhero, highest, purest standard we could think of in terms of superheroes, and we've deconstructed him down to the level of not only a cathartic motivational character like Spider-Man, but we bring him down to the level of Hamlet, where he's just pure catharsis, where people who care about him are care about him because they pity him, right? It's a different kind of response. You might be thinking, aren't we just talking about stories after all? Aren't these just people's taste in films, people's taste in stories? But no, we're actually talking about mythology. And remember, as I mentioned in the beginning, John Fiske says mythology is a society's way of understanding, expressing, and communicating to itself concepts that are important to its self-identity as a culture. So what we communicate to ourselves matters. It's going to shape us. It's going to mold us in some degree. Think about it like this way with this chart. If this is us here, this is our human condition. This is the level. That's the aspirational superhero standard. That's where Superman, Captain America, and so forth want us to be. We strive to get that high. We're going to reach somewhere maybe here. Maybe that's our possible human potential. We can't get there, but we can maybe get somewhere here. The cathartic motivational characters might get us somewhere here, maybe close to that or whatever. We're not going to go up there unless we have the aspirational level to... Once you add realism, though, realism is going to drag the aspirational standard down, right? Let's make it human. Let's rough them up a little bit. Let's make them easier to relate to. You're going to drag that down. And once you drag that aspirational standard down, down comes your human potential. Down comes your ability to reach out and be like that. Today's supervillains end up becoming our pictures of tomorrow's heroes. So you might have made it all this way, and you're thinking, that's great, but I'm not even into superheroes that much. Maybe you think, I'm certainly not using them to define my values or my identity. Well, maybe not, but you are using something out there to define your identity and your values. Think about what you are into. Is it sports, politics, celebrities, pop culture? We mythologize each one of these things as surely as we do superheroes. So examine your own interests, whatever they may be. What type of people or characters do you consider role models? What kind of values or traits do they have, you think about? I think you'll find the same phenomena that I just described in superheroes is happening in politics, sports culture, and so on. As human beings, we're hardwired for mythology. We're going to mythologize something. You are going to mythologize something. So we just need to be mindful of the type of characters and stories, real or fictional, that you're allowing to set the standards for your life. And when it comes to superheroes, remember that the important thing is to overcome the insecurity and the self-doubt and always aspire to be something greater. Thanks.